Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa. And as the US turns out for one of its most important elections in half a century, we take a look at the stakes for Africa as a nation that's long dominated international systems decides its course. The outcome of the US presidential vote will have global consequences, from the impact on the international response to climate change, to aid, to US involvement in regional disputes and relations. Africa has skin in the game. The last 4 years have seen Donald Trump show disinterest, if not disdain, for the continent. Nicolas Chemin has more.
It's fair to say Donald Trump displayed little interest in Africa. During his 4 years in power, not once did the US president set foot on the continent. Early on, he imposed a ban on visas for several majority Muslim nations, many of them in Africa. In January 2018, he reportedly described African nations as shithole countries during a meeting with lawmakers. He later denied this.
No, I'm not a racist. I am the least racist person you have ever interviewed. That I can tell you.
Analysts said his diplomats did try to promote democracy in certain countries. In DR Congo, they backed the easing out of Joseph Kabila. In Cameroon, they supported initiatives to end the conflict in the English-speaking regions. Regarding Sudan, Trump said the country would be removed from the terror list once it had paid more than $300 million to compensate American victims of terror attacks. He also put pressure on the government to normalize ties with Israel. Trump also tried to strong-arm Ethiopian leader Abiy Ahmed into accepting a deal with Egypt in the dispute over a hydropower dam on the Nile. Although the US president did not go to Africa, his wife Melania did. She spoke about education and conservation, but was criticized for wearing a hat that was a symbol of colonial rule across Africa. Some US businesses regretted Trump's lack of involvement with Africa, saying America is losing its share of the market on the continent at a time when China, Russia, India and Turkey are increasing theirs. It should be noted that not all Africans are against Trump. Many evangelical Christian groups, for example, who are mostly anti-abortion and against gay rights, are backing the Republican candidate.
Well, Douglas Yates is a professor in international relations and African politics. He joins us now for a closer look at relations between Africa and the US. Doug, what's your take on this? How relevant is the outcome of these US elections to Africa?
Well, there's a great deal of continuity in U.S. policy towards Africa, but Trump is clearly a president who has expressed racist views. He called Africa the African countries S-hole countries. So clearly a change to Biden and Kamala Harris will make a difference in the optics of U.S. foreign policy. And I think Biden will probably actually go to Africa.
So we saw that towards the end of those last 4 years, Trump paid a little bit more attention to the continent. How so, and how come?
Well, his signature policy was called Prosper Africa, and it was effectively a doubling of U.S. investments in Africa from $30 billion to $60 billion. But unlike its name, this money was not actually going to Africa. This was $60 billion going to American corporations. So I think the more traditional focus on aid and a return to normal will be more beneficial for Africa.
Thanks very much, Doug. So he'll be staying with us throughout the programme as we look at various other aspects of the relationship between the US and the continent. Now, the US finances about 95% of reproductive health aid in Kenya. Since 1984, the Mexico City policy has banned US funding to NGOs offering abortion. With each Democratic mandate, it's suspended, only to be brought back in by Republican administrations. In 2017, Donald Trump went further and cut funding to organizations providing abortion counseling. Cuts that also affected care provided for things like HIV or nutrition. Today, many small clinics in Kenya are still struggling to survive. Our team reports.
It is not easy for women in Kenya's poorer neighborhoods to access information on abortions, even when they can afford them. The choice to terminate a pregnancy is only allowed when there is a medical complication. Farida was still in school when she got pregnant in 2017. Young and distressed, she had no options.
I wanted to have an abortion, but I didn't know anyone that I can talk to. So I had to keep that pregnancy, yet I didn't want it. If you have someone who can mentor you, explain to you everything about abortion, it's easier for you.
95% of the reproductive health care in Kenya is funded by the United States. In 2017, President Donald Trump reinstated the Mexico City policy, which barred funding for organizations which offered advice related to safe abortions. Clinics in poor neighborhoods were hit the hardest. However, this doctor chose to continue to inform women about the choices available in pregnancy.
We have to seek other alternatives, either from the government, which is not reliable, or us as a facility we share with the client. But being an informal settlement, at times it's a bit tricky.
Steph Musho, a women's rights activist, believes the country does not need funding from the U.S.
Kenya is able to take care of the needs when we look at health. It's just that we're not seeing the government committed in that they need to increase budgetary allocations to this cause so that we stop having to be at the mercy of the U.S. and who's at the helm of it.
According to an American study, this policy is counterproductive and could cause a 40% increase in abortions. More than 400,000 women seek abortions in Kenya every year. They are often illegal and lead to the deaths of 7 women daily. Health NGOs are following the U.S. elections closely, as a change in leadership could mean another change in policy and the return of funding for sexual health clinics in Africa.
Back to Doug now. Doug, in the US, a lot of the pressure to discourage access to or advice on abortion comes from evangelical Christians in the States. A lot of majority Christian African countries are deeply religious. Do you think that relationship amplifies the influence of American evangelicals on the African continent?
Yeah, this was a great report on the kind of effect domestic policy in the United States, trying to build an electoral coalition, evangelicals support Trump strongly, has on U.S. policy towards Africa. So that aid that's being given to hospitals in Kenya is extremely important, but there's a global gag rule that's being enforced, which says no money will be given if you allow contraceptives and abortions. Now, ironically, it produces just the opposite effect, because if you limit money to contraceptions, you're actually going to increase the number of abortions. The influence of evangelicals is nothing new, but what Trump did during his administration was he extended this global gag rule, and this is important. He extended it to aid money for AIDS and HIV, and that had been the signature African policy of George W. Bush, which was also backed by evangelicals. So I think the evangelical influence has to be played out through the president in place, and here it's been catastrophic.
Thanks very much, Doug. We'll hear from you a little bit later. Now, last year, Africa had one of the fastest growing number of immigrants to the US. Many moved to further their education. Some, though, have benefited from the US diversity visa lottery program, or green card lottery. Under Trump, criteria was toughened up, and only applicants with valid passports can apply. But the hopeful are undeterred. In Togo, more than 100,000 people apply every year. Some years, it's up to 1 million. Many work with fixers who help them take their shot. Emmanuel Soji sent us these stories.
I have to provide for my family, my cousin, my mother, my father, everyone. When you don't earn enough, you can't live correctly here. You cannot give stuff to anybody, like your mother or your children, that you want to educate. You have to leave. You have to look elsewhere. I've chosen the United States.
The people that come here are mostly students, especially high school graduates, or professionals who are already working but want to travel to the USA to settle there permanently. They come here and try their luck. They want to go to the US simply because it's the world's leading power. The economy is booming there. The English language doesn't scare people. They see the opportunity to find work very quickly. Before, they were trying their luck, being sure that the lottery would continue to exist. Nowadays, they're not so sure. People think the program could be stopped overnight.
This is my first time entering the lottery. I've decided only this year to do it. It's a great stepping stone and a more accessible way to leave, because trying to do that on your own isn't easy. The COVID-19 pandemic isn't holding me back. I still feel like going away, exploring other worlds, seeing how things are on the other side. That's my attitude.
Well, Doug, the last 4 years under Trump have been turbulent. Do you think that they've affected international perceptions of what the US has to offer? Specifically, does that idea of the American dream still hold much sway in Africa?
The American dream. With some aspects, yes. The image of democracy is still largely favorable in Africa. If you look at Afrobarometer surveys, most Africans support democracy. That part of the American dream, yes. But when you're looking at the hope for improving yourself economically, and when they've interviewed migrants who are leaving, who are emigrating from Africa, why they're migrating, it's 43% of them say to find work, 38% to escape poverty. That part of the American dream doesn't seem to be working because only 10% of those migrants indicate that the United States is the destination that they're heading for. So democracy, yes. The economic promise, perhaps not.
Thanks very much. Douglas Yates there for our Eye on Africa American special. That is, though, all we have time for. Thanks for joining us. Do stay with us. France 24 will be following the progress with the election throughout the night. Join us again if you can. Take care.